I'm Patricia Van Skyke, Director of the Lloyd Library and Museum. I'd like to welcome you to the Healing Powers of Trees, a global perspective, how trees help us survive and thrive. The Lloyd Library was founded in the 1870s by three brothers who conducted research and manufactured nature-based drugs. To support their research, they collected widely books on plants and nature, especially medicinal plants. Our collection has grown to over 250,000 items. It goes back to the 1400s and contains important works, including some of the earliest published books on trees. Today's lecture brings together our strong historical collections with a contemporary look at the healing power of trees. Our presenter, Dr. Rama Kasturi, has conducted research and has personal experience in our local area, Costa Rica, and India, where she was born and raised. Dr. Kasturi has a Ph.D. in biochemistry. She's an advocate for the underserved and a promoter of environmental sustainability. She published her photo essay of her healing journey within the natural world in a 2019 book entitled 4 Seasons in Burnet Woods. It's now my pleasure to welcome Dr. Rama Kasturi. Welcome, Rama. And we're going to have to do this for a minute. Well, okay. Rama.
Thank you, Patricia. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be invited to speak at the Lloyd Library. As Patricia said, you're here today to hear my presentation on how trees help us survive and thrive, which is how they help us heal as well. And I want to start out by thanking you for being here. And I thank the Lloyd Library for this opportunity to speak on a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Just wanted to let you know that I have not done any of the research that I will talk about today. My research expertise is in a completely different area, but I did want you to know that everything that I'm presenting to you today has either been learned through my own personal experience from walking 28 years almost daily in Burnet Woods, and by growing in my home city of India, where I climbed on trees, ate the fruit directly off the trees, etc. So it is my pleasure to tell you just how much I love trees and why you should too, and how they helped me survive and thrive, and how they help you do so as well in case you aren't aware of it and just take them for granted. About 30% of the world's trees are already extinct, and it is critically important in this day of climate change and global warming that we understand and respect the role that trees play in our lives and in our very existence. So what are some of the benefits of trees that I will talk about today and touch on? Trees offer us environmental benefits. They offer health and social benefits. They have economic benefits. Anybody who's eaten a banana or sampled a mango knows all about what trees offer us in terms of fruits and food. And of course, trees support biodiversity across the planet. The environmental benefits of trees are magnificent. If it weren't for trees, you might have inflamed lungs from all the air pollution due to modern day lifestyles. The trees help to absorb various gases that are put out into the atmosphere by modern day living. As I said, they help absorb ozone, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide. The leaves of trees, and I brought you an example today of a Kentucky yellowwood growing in my backyard. They have pores on them called stomata, and these tiny pores on the surface of every leaf on every tree or plant helps to pull in these noxious chemicals, so you and I don't have to inhale them and inflame our lungs, leading to respiratory disease. The surface of these trees, the leaves of these trees, also traps particulate matter. So when the breeze blows pass these tree leaves right beside the highway or anywhere close to where the pollution is, the particulate matter that you and I do not need in our lungs is trapped by the surface of these leaves. And the end result is that you breathe air that is fresher and cleaner as a result. Trees absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen and water vapor. If it weren't for trees, you would not have the very air that you are breathing right now. Trees produce oxygen and water vapor. They use the sunlight and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere through the chlorophyll, the green pigment in their leaves, to synthesize glucose, which is the basis of the wood that is formed in trees. But in doing so, they release oxygen, which is critically important to all creatures that rely on aerobic respiration, and that includes humans. They decrease the ambient temperature and they increase precipitation. Anybody who's been in a forest or in the woods knows that it feels much cooler than the concrete jungle that we may have escaped in going to the woods. They help to increase precipitation. If it weren't for trees, there'd be no water vapor, there'd be no clouds, there wouldn't be any rainfall, we wouldn't have water, another essential part of our existence. They reduce stormwater runoff and improve water quality. So all that lawn fertilizer, all the fertilizers you use, vegetable beds, all that nitrogen, all that phosphorus gets taken up by the roots of trees as the water rushes past them. The roots of the trees also slow down the rate of that surface water flow, the stormwater runoff, by absorbing it and then carrying it up through the surface through the tree leaves and releasing it into the air through a process known as transpiration, which is what produces the water vapor. And the process of preventing stormwater runoff from just rushing into the seas is also important because it prevents erosion. So you don't get all of that flooding as well from increased water levels. As we all know, every time we have massive rains in Cincinnati, we see the water levels rise in the Ohio River because from every little stream and creek that collected that rainwater, we get the increase in the level of the river. So basically, I'm not trying to do more than just summarize how beneficial trees are to our everyday existence and the quality of our lives with respect to our water, with respect to the air we breathe, with respect to preventing flooding. This is my favorite part of the talk, trying to get you guys to remember this particular equation, which I'm sure you last saw and confronted with fear in probably the 3rd or the 4th grade. This is how trees play a role in the oxygen cycle. Carbon dioxide plus water giving you C6H12O6, which is essentially glucose, plus oxygen. I bet you never thought that you would have to revisit it today, but right now, at this point in your life, I want you to consider this enormously beneficial equation, which we all hated to have to memorize. So what's going on here? This is the process by which trees produce oxygen, which is critically important for all aerobic organisms to have in order to exist. So the carbon dioxide is what's available in the atmosphere. The water is the water vapor that I talked about. In the leaves of every tree or plant is a green pigment called chlorophyll. And the chlorophyll uses the energy of the sun, the light energy of the sun, to convert and combine carbon dioxide and water to produce sugars. And that is the building block of the tree's existence. So what the trees do is put out oxygen in this process, which is known as photosynthesis, so taking light energy, converting it into chemical energy, and all because of a green pigment called chlorophyll. And this is the dominant pigment in the leaves of most trees and plants. And the reason why you see autumn or fall colors is when the dominant color goes away in the fall, when trees are no longer synthesizing glucose, it's replaced by the other colors, which are always there. You can see them because the dominant green disappears when the when glucose is not being synthesized by the trees, by the leaves of the trees. So oxygen is the end product of this for all of us, and the sugar is the critical food that the trees need to live and grow. So the second equation that is of importance to us is the same exact photosynthesis equation that I just mentioned. This is also the carbon cycle of trees. The carbon dioxide that is being taken out of the atmosphere in order to provide food for the trees in this process is what is known as carbon fixation by trees. So this is the carbon cycle. So all the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is being cycled through this process, which results in sugars being polymerized to form cellulose. So cellulose is the backbone of the tree. So cellulose is a polymer of glucose, and it polymerizes with other substances, including lignin, to form the woody backbone of trees. So this is how trees fix carbon within themselves. So as the tree grows, which you know it does, like humans, trees grow, except they grow faster, bigger, depending on the type of tree. They are continuously fixing carbon and storing it. They're sinking it into their wood. So this is what is known as carbon sinking by trees. So once again, photosynthesis takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and creates sugars which polymerize to form wood, which is how trees grow. And in the process of doing so, trees take carbon out of the atmosphere and store them inside of their wood. So it's in the branches, it's in the trunk, it's in the roots. And this is a cycle which I will show you is closed, meaning that when the tree dies, a lot of that carbon goes back into the soil. Soil actually has twice as much carbon reserves as the tree itself. And leaf litter and others, when they get decomposed, that carbon comes out of it, but then eventually that carbon is taken back by the tree and stored, and the cycle continues. So this is the carbon cycle of trees. The average lifetime benefits of a single one-year-old tree with a 2.5-inch caliper or less. So what does that mean, and why do I have this slide here for you today? Just want you to marvel at what one single tree, in this case, a sugar maple at the edge of Burnet Woods on the corner of Martin Luther King and Burnet Drive. One beautiful sugar maple, which is over 65 years old. A single one-year-old tree with a less than 2.5-inch caliper. Let me define what caliper means. If you go up to a tree and you stand beside it, the diameter of the tree at breast height is what's known as the tree caliper. So it's 2.5-inch diameter. So a small tree at breast height, less than 2.5-inch diameter, would produce 12 pounds of oxygen, which would allow 6 people to breathe for an entire day. 4 pounds of carbon would be stored. That just equals the amount of carbon put out by an airplane moving 71 feet. Not sufficient to offset all of that air travel. Produces 119 gallons of water evaporation. That has the cooling effect of 5 air conditioners working for 20 hours. And this is all for free. This is what a tree gives you. And it's a one-year-old tree with a small diameter. So the older the tree, the more carbon that it sinks, the more oxygen that it produces, and the more evaporation and cooling you derive from it. So the moral of the story here so far is don't cut down your old mature trees and claim that you can offset it with young trees. It takes trees a long time to be able to do what they do best, which is what I just alluded to, in the same way that it takes a human a long time to get the kind of wisdom that those of us gathered here today can bring because of our age. It takes experience to get to do your jobs well, so also for trees. If you're interested in learning more about what your individual trees in your yards or in your neighborhood are doing for you, I recommend that you look at the iTree app, which is put out by the USDA Forest Service. It's a fantastic tool, and it can be found at www.itreetools.org. org, and you can sit down and analyze exactly how well the trees in your own neighborhood or in your yard are contributing to reducing global warming and reducing environmental impacts of modern day living. This is another slide that shows you how much carbon can be sequestered by various tree species growing in the same area over a period of 50 years. When you start out with a 1.5-inch caliper tree across all of these tree species. As you can see, the trees in your backyard can be selected to perform at various levels of functionality with respect to carbon sequestration. So all trees are not created equal, and how much carbon is sequestered by a tree of a given size varies depending on the species of that tree, and also where the tree grows. So a tree has to be growing in order for it to sequester carbon out of the atmosphere. So trees that grow in the tropics are pulling in more carbon dioxide out of the air and storing them in the wood that they are producing and necessary for them to grow, rather than trees that are in colder climates. So this is why rainforests matter. This is why protecting the forests of the earth matters to mankind. It's not just what happens in your environment, it's the global environment that matters. So it's very critically important to advocate for preservation of the rainforest and contribute to their preservation as well. And this is because rapidly growing trees will pull more carbon out of the atmosphere than those that go through fall and winter and therefore are inhibited with respect to their growth. So this is the closed loop of a forest carbon cycle. What does that mean? The natural carbon cycle is one where carbon is produced, but it's also taken back in. So when a tree dies, it decomposes. Some of that carbon that was stored in its wood comes back. It's released when it degrades back into the atmosphere. But then the tree takes up that carbon, makes more wood, grows. And so that's what you call a closed loop. Even when you get wood furniture, as long as you don't burn the wood, that carbon is sunk into the wood that was used to make the furniture. It's there. It's not been released back into the atmosphere. Same when you burn firewood. This was something that I learned a few years ago, and it was kind of astonishing to me that when you burn firewood, it's carbon neutral. That the carbon that was sequestered in the wood is being released when you burn it. So what makes firewood not a good source of energy? It's the best source of energy, but it's not sustainable. For today's world, you'd have to cut down all the trees all the time, which is what's been happening, in order to be able to satisfy our thirst and our need for this kind of biomass. So while wood, the reason why burning wood is also not the most efficient way to produce energy is because most of that firewood is not burned efficiently. It's an inefficient way. It contributes to a lot of particulate matter, and there's a whole host of other problems that come with burning wood inefficiently. But the carbon cycle in a forest is a closed cycle. So carbon is produced, but carbon is sequestered by the growing trees, and the cycle it's one of death and rebirth. So it's a continuous closed loop, as opposed to what you see on the far side of that slide when you burn fossil fuel. Fossil fuel is an open system. You take it out of the ground, you burn it, you just put carbon dioxide back into the air. There's nothing that is renewable about it. It just contributes and adds to the amount of carbon dioxide in the air, the amount of carbon. And I found an interesting statistic for you. A gallon of gas, which we all burned if you drove our cars here today, generates about 20 pounds of carbon dioxide. Now, this is an astonishing amount of carbon dioxide, given how many gallons of gas we fill in our cars and how many cars are on planet Earth being driven by people myself included. So something to consider, that burning fossil fuel is not going to save the planet, which is warming and is being burdened by greenhouse gases. So here's a plug for electric vehicles. I don't have one myself, but I will try to get it in the next cycle of car buying. I try not to drive my car. That's the way I deal with that. So final point on this particular subject, your carbon footprint. Why does it matter? The carbon footprint of an average American is 32,000 pounds, which is 16 tons of carbon dioxide per year. A single mature tree absorbs 50 pounds of carbon dioxide a year, which means that each one of us in this room, if we are guilty of that average American carbon footprint, would require 640 trees be planted to offset our carbon footprint. This is not possible to do. So this is why we have to focus on trying to reduce our carbon footprint. The carbon footprint of America trumps that of Germany, and it trumps that of a whole lot of other countries in the world. We're not making a point here of trying to make us feel bad. We're just trying to tell us how to make ourselves feel good and stay healthy going forward from here. And one way to do that is to look at where the average American's carbon emissions come from and think about how one might reduce that carbon footprint by paying attention to where those carbon emissions come from. So transportation, like I said, takes up a big chunk of our carbon footprint, 28%. Food, stuff you buy, think Amazon, deliveries, home heating and cooling, 17%, and other home energy use. So again, something for people to consider as they think about global warming, their grandchildren, and what they can do about all of this on an individual level. This is the part of the talk that I love. This will I will be able to share with you some of the pictures that I have collected across my travels to various parts of the world, which Patricia made reference to. But this is a photo of General Sherman on the left, the world's largest sequoia. It's to be found in Sequoia National Park. It's a Sierra redwood. And the giant sequoias, as the name suggests, have lived for a very long time and are still alive if we don't succeed in destroying them. A single giant sequoia, known as General Sherman, has been able to sequester 1,500 tons of carbon dioxide as measured from its trunk over 2,200 years. So you can see what I said to you about that 1.5-inch caliper, one-year-old tree, and what it can do versus the 1,500 tons of carbon dioxide sequestered in the trunk of a tree that has been around for 2,200 years. So that's General Sherman on my left, and there's the pictures of the 2,000 to 3,000-year-old giant sequoias that I took when I was in Yosemite Valley. This is a photo from Merced Grove, outside of the main part of Yosemite. And all I can tell you is that the awe that these trees inspire when you look at them is something worth experiencing for yourselves. I got on my knees and bowed in front of these trees because that was all I could think of doing. I did try to hug them, but they have a very wide diameter. But to the extent that my arms would stretch on both sides, I did manage to give them a hug. They're simply amazing, and you have to see them for yourself. All right, moving on to the next part of this presentation, something that I have personally experienced, the impact of trees on human health and my health in particular. So trees have an amazing ability to impact your mental health and your physical well-being. And this is something known as Parks RX. So it's a treatment plan for the humankind with respect to nature. So there are doctors who are actually writing prescriptions for patients to go out in nature. And this is known as Parks RX. And why Parks RX? Obviously, this is something that people need to do more of, not doing enough of. So doctors have been moved, some doctors, to include in their practice of medicine a prescription to their patient to go out and heal themselves in nature or just experience it. What are some of the health benefits that research has proven to result from trees and being in green spaces? Trees have the ability to lower your risk of heart disease by lowering your heart rate and blood pressure when you are surrounded by them or in their presence. For those who are unable to move around for a variety of different reasons or move fast, it's not important that you move at all. You can just sit down in front of it, in front of the trees, relax, and take in the beauty. And you will notice, if you want to measure it, that your heart rate and your blood pressure drop if you're there for a significant amount of time, 30 minutes. These tests have been done. They can lower the risk of type 2 diabetes because just the act of walking around, moving, getting yourself there, and then maybe you're being moved to actually walk, not just sit and stare, might help you to become fitter, and being more fit, losing weight, helps you with your risk of type 2 diabetes and lowers your risk of it as well. Increased survivorship rates in people with treatable cancers. Obviously, if you get, a 4th stage pancreatic cancer diagnosis, being in nature might help soothe you, but it may not be able to save you. It also has been shown to lower the risk of premature death from all causes. It doesn't matter what the cause, but it's been shown to lower the risk of premature death. And you have mental health benefits as they relate to lowering rates of stress, depression, and anxiety, and I'll explain how in the next couple of slides. So I don't know if you've heard of the term forest bathing. It's a term that came out of Japan, and forest bathing is simply being around trees in order to experience the health benefits that are associated from being around trees. So this is a photograph I took yesterday in Burnet Woods, where a series of Kentucky yellowwoods on the Bird Owl Trail have shed their beautiful perfumed flowers onto the ground. And so what you see there is the flower, which they have lost their petals and are now lying on the ground, but it's just the most amazing sight. Picture yourself here and picture the healing that you would get from being in such a beautiful place. I do all the time, but I have the benefit of being able to be there in person to inhale these compounds known as phytoncides. What are phytoncides? They're plant-derived volatile organic compounds with antibacterial and antifungal activity. So trees signal each other when they are in danger. When the emerald ash borer is eating into the trunk of the ash tree, it's signaling the rest of the trees that it's in distress. It's telling them what to do to protect themselves, increase the level of bitter compounds, put out compounds that ward off insects. So they are fighting these pests just as much as you and I are in our gardens. And how do they do that? They have these volatile organic compounds. In other words, they are aerosolized compounds, and they include compounds that you might be familiar with. Who doesn't like the smell of freshly washed floors washed with pine sol? Who doesn't like the smell of a freshly cut lemon? So compounds, organic compounds, alpha pinene, beta pinene present in pine oil, carine, limonene, these are various compounds that you're already familiar with and which you use in your homes. These are the plant-derived organic compounds that can be aerosolized, and the inhalation of these compounds by people who are present around trees has been shown to have a variety of health benefits, including enhancement of immune function. There's actually been a study which shows that the number and the activity of natural killer cells is increased, and in having this effect, you get an increase in the anti-cancer and antiviral benefits from these compounds. So another example of how forest bathing can impact your health. And the other big deal is how forest bathing can help to improve your mental health. So you go into the woods, you go into a garden, you go into any sort of space in nature, if you haven't observed the change in your thought pattern, stop and think about it. I have had this experience firsthand when I was raising my teenagers, my twin teenagers, and arrived at the woods to walk a dog. So completely overwhelmed by all the arguments and all the fighting of two teenage children, not even sure that I could go on and live a normal life, let alone go back to my house and live with them. I have personally experienced the absolute calm that comes with walking in the woods for 45 minutes, where I was so stressed when I came in. I couldn't remember what I was talking about or what I was thinking about when I first arrived into the woods. This is because the act of walking in these green spaces surrounded by the forest and with all of the benefits that come from being in those spaces causes a variety of effects on the human brain. One is a decreased activation of a region of the brain known as the subgenual prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is what makes us humans. We have the biggest prefrontal cortex of all animals that can think and function like we do. And the result of showing a decreased activation in this area of the prefrontal cortex is that you ruminate less. So you don't go over and over and over those bad or dreadful thoughts that seem to plague you when you were not in these spaces. It helps to decrease the activation of the reptilian brain, which is the amygdala portion of the brain. And what it does is it restores the balance in autonomic function between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic systems by lowering the circulating levels of hormones that are known to produce stress and anxiety, adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol. And it also allows you to increase circulating endorphin levels, which are nature's opioids. It's normal, naturally occurring opioids. And it gives you the runner's high that people talk about. Even though it causes them pain, the pain of running a marathon is offset by the endorphins produced in response to that pain, which helps to improve your mood. So you don't remember the pain, you remember the pleasure. So the end result of all of this is that you have lower rates of stress, lower rates of depression and anxiety, improved cognition. Of course, you can think better when you're not overwhelmed by all the negative stimulation, and you have fewer symptoms of ADHD. So the bottom line is all of this can be proven. And if you don't need any proof, just go there and trust me, go there and get the benefits. See for yourself. You don't need research to back up your sense of well-being in natural spaces. But urban trees, why should you plant trees in your backyard, in your front yard, or simply why you need more street trees and should advocate for the same? Because they increase your property values. When you have a deciduous tree, it loses its leaves in the winter. You get more sunshine, more sunlight. Your house gets warmed up naturally, decreases your heating costs. In the summer, in the spring and summer, the leafing out of the trees helps you to decrease your air conditioning needs because it offers cooling under its canopy. And it is, again, documented that you get lower respiratory and cardiovascular disease-related deaths in urban areas that have a lot of trees. And this is why they talk about tree equity. They talk about planting more trees in urban areas where, poorer people have lived historically. So, for example, my neighborhood, Clifton, is very blessed to have a lot of trees, old mature trees, as well as a lot of green spaces around it in order for people to derive all the benefits of trees. So there is now a movement to restore balance by making sure that trees are being planted in areas of Cincinnati, for example, where there has been historically a low number of trees to help those communities also derive the benefits that can be obtained from trees. So they reduce workplace stress and fatigue. So it's nice to work in a neighborhood where if you're working in a building surrounded by trees, it makes you feel better overall. So advocate for that wherever you're working. Ask your employer to plant more trees, create more green spaces. It decreases the recovery time after medical procedures, and strangely has been shown to reduce criminal activity and gun-related violence. Seems to help calm brains that may otherwise lend themselves to picking up a gun and inflicting violence on unsuspecting people. So that, again, in praise of trees because of the many benefits they offer us. This is the next point that I'd like to focus on to show you the economic benefits of trees. So you're all familiar with the banana tree. This is a tropical tree. Equatorial tropical areas of the world lend themselves to cultivating the banana tree. And who hasn't had a banana? Who doesn't love the one banana that is now globally available, not globally available, actually, cultivated in the Americas? It is the Cavendish banana, the one that survived the fungal blight in the early part of the 19th century, because monoculture of bananas caused a wipeout when a fungal disease attacked the bananas that were being cultivated then. So this brings me back to an important point about trees. It's very important to have a variety of trees. It's very important to cultivate a variety of cultivars of the banana in order to prevent disease from taking hold and wiping out plantations. So people are learning slowly but surely that trees, like humans, don't like to live around people just like themselves. They like to be around a variety of other tree species because it helps to sustain an environment that is healthier and better for the trees as well. These just pictures of trees, of banana trees that I took when I was on vacation in Costa Rica on the right. But I grew up with banana trees. They are eaten as fruit. The leaves can be used as sustainable plates. In India, we have weddings. We serve food on banana leaves. And the beautiful thing about all of this is you don't have to wash any dishes, don't have to waste any soap, don't have to dry any dishes. And in the end, you bring cows from somebody's farm and you feed them all the leftovers. So the cows eat it all and there's no trace of any waste because everybody is well fed as a result and sustainable. The other tree that you are all familiar with maybe is the coconut palm tree. I grew up in India, southern India, worships the coconut palm tree. We worship a lot of trees, but this is a tree that has huge significance, cultural and personal significance to every South Indian. We cook with the milk of the coconut. We use the palm fronds to thatch our roofs in the villages of India. We can use we strip the ribs and bind them together to have a broom that you buy at Costco now. But basically the husk is used, the fruit is used both when you have the meat still being tender on the inside. It lends itself to hydrating people. It's very rich in a variety of nutrients. So every part of the coconut palm tree has value to us in India, and it is a southern Indian tree. And to hear the palm fronds wave in the breeze at 11 o'clock at night while you're studying for your exams is a very soothing, relaxing, and welcome thing. So just want to say that the term to curry, which the British turned into a curry powder and curry everything, comes from using the milk of the coconut tree in cooking. So there is no curry powder. To curry is to use coconut milk as a base, just like you would use milk cream as a base. So to curry favor is actually to take a coconut and give it to somebody, because that is essentially what we do in southern India. It's something that people want as a gift. So either you take a coconut and give it to somebody as a gift, or you receive one as a gift in return from the family that you're visiting. It makes an acceptable gift. Another tree that you're familiar with is the cacao tree. Again, a tree that has been cultivated and used widely. Who hasn't enjoyed the chocolate that can be derived from the cocoa that's derived from the cacao tree fruit. And again, very susceptible to fungal blight. Picture of the trees on the left is one I took in Costa Rica when I was there last year. It's amazing how well the world knows what grows in the tropics, because it lends itself to becoming popular worldwide. This is a photo of the silk cotton tree, or the kapok tree. Again, this is a 400-year-old tree from Costa Rica. And the kapok tree, or the silk cotton tree as it's known, is played a huge role in the Mayan and the Aztec cultures and the pre-American cultures, as they're called. And the Maya worshiped this tree because they thought this was the way to ascend to heaven. They thought it was at the center of the universe, and it has long aerial roots that people believed allowed humans to ascend to the heavens. So this is the tree that we saw inside of a rainforest area, 400 years old, provides incredible habitat for a variety of birds and animals, including bats, which pollinate the flowers which bloom at night. So that's a picture of the flower when it blooms, and it only blooms at night. The fruit of the kapok tree is very abundant. The seeds are surrounded by a fiber, which has been used as a replacement for cotton. It can't be woven because the fibers are too short and not as strong, but they can be used for stuffing. And it's a tree of the New World, but it was taken to the Old World. So it's widely cultivated in India and in Indonesia. And of course, colonials took it with them and cultivated it in other parts of the world. So this is an example of all the rainforest animals that are supported by big trees like the kapok tree and all the other trees of the rainforest. So they provide habitat, support biodiversity. And again, I would take the opportunity to go and check out the birds, bees, butterflies of the rainforest. It's absolutely beautiful. Some of the birds of the tropics, some of these pictures I took, others I borrowed, but there's macaws, kingfishers, parrots, and toucans, amazing creatures. Have to see them in the rainforest, provided we take care of them and make sure they're there for future generations to see. Moving along, these are medicinal trees. That's the next focus of my talk. You've heard about cinchona. Cinchona is a South American tree, predominantly found in the countries of South America. And Peruvian cinchona is the source of, anybody want to guess? Quinine and quinidine, two drugs that are used in modern day medicine. The bark of this tree was what was used to treat malaria. It was the only known treatment for malaria. So Peruvian cinchona was the source, and the tree was almost brought to the brink of extinction by its use to prevent malaria in the colonizing countries, as well as so basically what ended up happening from what I read was the cinchona tree was once again put under a lot of pressure as a result of unproven COVID-19 treatments, where they decided that you could use the anti-malaria drug in order to treat COVID-19. So once again, the poor tree, which was almost became extinct because of its use in the treatment of malaria, was put under pressure because it was offered as a treatment for COVID-19, which turned out not to be the case. So a lot of effort is being put into saving this tree in Peru. It's the national tree of Peru, actually. And the Jesuits brought cinchona to Europe, and it was often known as Jesuit bark or Peruvian bark, but that's the reason why. And some other trees that I want to focus on, medicinal trees, the Pacific yew. This is of great significance. Taxol is synthesized from the Pacific yew extracts, but originally it was the bark of the Pacific yew that was used to produce a drug that was the first of its kind in the treatment of solid tumors. So it was used to treat breast, ovarian, and lung cancers. And it's very difficult to treat these kinds of tumors, but Taxol, or paclitaxel as the drug is known in its generic form, was one of its kind, again, derived from the bark of the Pacific yew tree. So another example of how important it is for trees to put down their wood in the way that they do and how we benefit from them. And it takes the bark of 3 trees to provide enough medication for the treatment of 1 human being. Thankfully, we have not had to destroy these trees. They're slow growing, predominantly grow in the Pacific Northwest. In the forest there, old growth forests, they've been able to do a semi-synthetic pathway using the needles and other yew trees as the basis for the synthesis of Taxol. So for those of you who were alarmed by the fact that they were that it takes the bark of 3 trees to make enough treatment for 1 person, they have found a way around destroying the trees in an attempt to make Taxol. The willow is another famous tree used for medicinal purposes. Once again, the bark of the willow tree is what lends itself to use as an anti-inflammatory and anti-pain medicine. It was known to the Egyptians, it was known to the Sumerians, it was known to the Greeks. So it's been around a very, very, very long time, 5,000 years or more. And the bark of the willow tree contains salicin, which was the precursor to aspirin, acetyl salicylic acid. So salicin is supposedly as good as aspirin and kinder and gentler on your stomach, but it's not available except through natural therapies as the powder of the bark of the willow tree. Again, trees figure prominently in how we survive and thrive, and this is yet another example. This is a tree that I chose to focus on because it's what's known. There are 2 trees I'm going to speak about today, 2 living fossils, the ginkgo tree and the dawn redwood tree, both of which are, of course, in Burnet Woods, and it's been my pleasure to become acquainted with them. So what is a living fossil? Why is the ginkgo tree known as a living fossil? Living fossils are trees that are found in the fossil record, thought to have become extinct, but thankfully and surprisingly are not extinct. Either they're a relative of what was seen in the fossil, a very close relative, or they're identical to that which was found in the fossil record. These trees have been around for 170 million years. They can live to be 3,000 years old or more, and the oldest living ginkgo tree is found in China. It's 5,000 years old, plus or minus 500 years. They're still arguing about it. But my take on the ginkgo tree is that if you want to be reborn, if you believe in reincarnation, you want to come back as a ginkgo tree. It is the most amazing tree. It is fire resistant and is the reason why it survived the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The ginkgo trees were the only trees that survived bombing of Hiroshima. And I found this out when a fellow breast cancer survivor gave me as a gift 2 leaves of the ginkgo tree from a tree in Oakley Square with a letter and a note which said, I have nothing to offer you except these 2 ginkgo tree leaves which survived the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. May you find strength and resilience in this story. And I have to share that with you. This is a tree that has survived every attempt to wipe it off the face of the earth. And this is why I recommend that you pray that you come back as a ginkgo tree, because this is a tree that shows no evidence of growing old with all the warts and damages that accumulate in the human body. And the earthquake in Japan in the 1930s also proved that these trees are fire resistant. And so the leaves of this tree are the symbol of Tokyo. And the ginkgo tree is planted because if there is an earthquake, they can survive the fires that result from these earthquakes in Japan. The ginkgo tree is also a tree whose leaves are used to make ginkgo biloba, the tea that is supposed to help you cognitively, even though people argue there's no scientific evidence for that. But you will see any number of Chinese people in Burnet Woods with gloves on trying to pick the fruits which have a very smelly outer skin. But once they assure me that once you get past that, you can get to being able to extract the medicines that come with the seeds and the leaves. Another living fossil is the Dawn redwood tree. And this is right behind the Trailside Nature Center. There are two trees. Every Dawn redwood tree is descended from a clump of Chinese trees. They thought they were extinct. These trees were here when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And it was believed that they had become extinct just like the dinosaurs. But right before World War II, it was discovered in China, and it took until the World War II ended for people from the Arnold Arboretum in Harvard to go back to China to help collect the seeds from the trees that were discovered in China and then cultivate them and distribute them worldwide. So every Dawn redwood tree that is currently planted in the world, they are descended from the clump of trees that were found in China. So again, you may want to give up on the trees, but they don't give up on themselves, is the moral of that story. But the cones of the Dawn redwood tree, which you see in my photo on the left, they are so perfectly symmetrical and so beautiful. And I convinced somebody who's a jeweler in Cincinnati, an artist, to turn them into jewelry. So it is available, and I can tell you where to buy them if you're interested. But amazing redwood tree. It is related to the giant sequoias, but it's not a giant sequoia. And it is a deciduous tree. It loses its leaves in the winter, but they're leafing out right now. And you can go and look at the one right behind. There's two of them right behind the Trailside Nature Center in Burnet Woods. One of them, the larger of the two, is a co-champion tree. And it's a champion tree along with the 400-year-old oak tree that's in Spring Grove Cemetery. So these are both champion trees for you to go and visit in your spare time. Sacred trees of India, the Bodhi tree, Ficus religiosa, and the banyan tree, Ficus bengalensis, are two trees that feature predominantly in the history and the culture of the Indian subcontinent. The Bodhi tree, the tree of enlightenment, is a tree famous in both Buddhism and Hinduism. And it is the tree that Buddha obtained enlightenment under. And the oldest tree of this, derived from the original tree, that was the one that I said that Buddha got enlightenment under, is in Sri Lanka, and it's over 2,500 years old. And those trees are referred to as Bodhi trees, as in Buddha got his enlightenment by sitting under them. And so these are the children, and the children, so they derive from the original ficus tree that is associated with Buddha. And the banyan tree is the actual national tree of India, and it is also known as the strangler fig, because of the fact that it basically dissolves. It's almost parasitic in that it's an epiphyte. It grows onto a plant and then it strangles the original plant. And the photo that I have here is one that I took right outside Bangalore. So the biggest banyan trees are found in India, and this one covers 3 acres. It's a single tree. The original trunk died out, it rotted out, but because of the fact that it drops aerial roots and plants itself, generates woody stems all along the way, it essentially is many generations derived from the original banyan tree, and it is 3 acres large, and it is not the largest banyan tree, but it's one that I'm familiar with. But it is the national tree of India, And again, these trees are large. They support an enormous amount of biodiversity. You can find monkeys and all kinds of creatures jumping on their tree branches. I want to finish up by giving you an Indian Poet Laureate's perspective on trees. Again, talking to the importance of trees in cultures across the world. So Rabindranath Tagore, who won a Nobel Prize in the early part of the 19th century, he essentially said, the one who plants trees knowing that he will never sit in their shade has at least started to understand the meaning of life. So it's the gift that will keep on giving. And again, the same concept as the Mayas had with respect to their kapok tree. Trees are the earth's endless effort to speak to the listening heaven. So this idea that trees connect heaven and earth and whatever else lies beneath the earth. So this is not something that's new to any one culture or specific to any one culture. It's something that all cultures have figured out on their own. And these are some of the books that I would recommend that you read about if you want to know more about trees. One of my favorite books is The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. It's a child's book, but if you can go through that with your child and not burst into tears, I would say that your heart must be a lot harder than mine. But the book is an amazing story about just exactly how much trees give us. And you must read it with your children if you haven't already done so, or your grandchildren at this stage of your lives. The Hidden Life of Trees, Peter Wohlleben talks about just how trees communicate with each other, the wood wide web as opposed to the world wide web, and how they're interconnected just like we are through the wood wide web. Finding the Mother Tree by Susan Simard, and Elderflora, History of Trees from Around the World by Jared Farmer, some other books that you might find interesting. And I'd like to finish today by sharing with you a Giant Sequoia's Guide to Life, a gift from my son's girlfriend when they were in Yosemite. It's stuck to my microwave, and I'll read it to you. It says, have a thick skin, stand up to the heat, don't let things bug you, heal your wounds, enjoy your days in the sun, strive for balance, and hold yourself up high. Maybe you'll then find the way to heaven as well. So thank you so very much for letting me share my love of trees and my passion for being in the woods with you today. This has been an opportunity of a lifetime to share with you what I love so dearly.
Awesome, Rama.
Oh, thank you.
So Rama, did you want to take some questions?
Yes, I can do that.
And would you do that also here?
Yes, I'll come back.
And make sure your head is right, yes, and repeat the question too.
Okay. At this point, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
So Rama, what attracted you to trees first? Their beauty or their comfort or possibilities that trees can give you? A combination?
So the question is, what attracted me to trees in the first place? The answer would be, I'm not really sure, except that they were there and ran around them. I was very lucky to grow up in India, as I said, in Bangalore, which is my home city, where we have any number of large trees that lend themselves to being climbed on, have a lot of fruit that allow themselves to be plucked. We learned the hard way that milky sap is dangerous when it makes contact with your skin. There are some fruits that are best left untouched because they're not intended for human consumption. But no, I took them for granted like everybody else, and I've learned to recognize what they have given me, which I have taken without thinking about for a big chunk of my life.
You mentioned a lot of medicinal uses for trees. What does the threat of climate change and the effect on trees mean for our future ability to heal ourselves using these plants?
So the question is, what is the impact of climate change on the resources for medicinal purposes that trees represent? Most of the drugs that are in use in modern medicine are indeed derived from plants or trees. And this is why the pharmaceutical industry worldwide has invested a lot of its efforts in trying to preserve forests with biodiversity in tropical equatorial areas of the world. And so it is critically important that we continue to advocate for preservation of rainforests, that we advocate for preservation of trees worldwide, because so much of what we don't know about trees is very real, and it's necessary that we continue to have them around to understand how they may benefit us in terms of offering active ingredients for medicinal use in the future. So there are many diseases that we still don't have cures for, and we may yet find the answers in the rainforests of other parts of the world or in the trees of other parts of the world that we have not yet had the time to understand or use appropriately. And the Lloyd Library has a repository of books from all over the world trying to establish what trees there are and what medicinal uses have already been considered by people in those parts of the world, and try to use modern medical and pharmaceutical methods to bring them to use by more people worldwide. Any other questions?
Do you have a favorite tree, and if so, why?
Do I have a favorite tree, and if so, why? Now, this is a very difficult question to answer, but I would have to say that I have come to appreciate what I already offered as a tree. Since I was born and raised in India as a Hindu and believe in reincarnation, I am likely to favor being reborn as a ginkgo tree, so I could survive the very best and the very worst of what humankind has tried to do to the planet Earth. So yes, the ginkgo tree. Smells awful if you're a female ginkgo tree, but because the seed cover is not very pleasant to be around. But I just want you to know that the male ginkgo tree, by virtue of its pollen, is very allergenic. So if you can hold your nose and plant a ginkgo tree, I would plant a female ginkgo tree. But this brings up a topic that I didn't talk about, but trees are either monoecious or dioecious. By that, it means either the male and the female parts are within the same flower, or you have separate trees with just male flowers and separate trees with just female flowers. And a dioecious tree is one that has both houses. Dioecious is a Greek word for two houses. So it has both the male and female parts inside one flower, as opposed to the monoecious trees, which have male trees and female trees. So a lot of fruit trees in their non-hybridized state require you to plant a male and a female. And so you have to be careful when you plant trees to look and see how they become pollinated, whether it's self-pollinated or you need to have a male and a female tree in the same area. So any other questions? Well, thank you again. You've been a great audience. And thank you, Patricia, for the opportunity to talk to this group of people today. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I wanted to thank all of you for joining us today. Check out the Lloyd's YouTube channel for more programs on plants and nature and medicine and the health benefits. Thank you again, and we hope to see you next time.